They never tell you what they want, not with words, not directly, because avoidants don't reveal their hunger. They bury it, they deny it, they even lie to themselves about it. But if you look closely, if you study the pauses, the silences, the pullbacks, you'll see it. There is one thing they crave more than anything else. Something so rare, so misunderstood, that when they finally feel it, their entire nervous system softens. It isn't sex. It isn't praise. It isn't loyalty. It's something deeper. Something that reaches back into childhood, to the moment their emotional world was first shut down. Avoidants crave safety, not physical safety, not financial safety, but emotional safety. The kind of safety where they can exist, without judgment, without pressure, without someone demanding they open on command. That is the wound. That is the craving. And it is almost never given to them. Think about it. The avoidant child grew up in an environment where emotions were dangerous. Crying was punished. Needing was shamed. Closeness was unreliable. So what did they learn? They learned to shrink their feelings. They learned to close their mouth. They learned to survive by withdrawing. And in that withdrawal, their nervous system found a kind of safety. Not true safety, not warm safety, but safety in control, safety in distance, safety in hiding. Fast forward to adulthood. And what do they crave? The thing they were never given. The freedom to exist in intimacy, without being swallowed whole. They crave someone who doesn't treat closeness like a cage. They crave someone who can sit in silence without making it wrong. They crave the experience of being wanted, but not demanded, loved, but not cornered, chosen, but not controlled. This is the paradox of the avoidant. They appear to run from love, but in truth, they are running from the terror of losing themselves. And what they long for is the one space where love doesn't equal suffocation. For women, this creates confusion because women are often taught to show love through constant reassurance, through closeness, through pursuit. Talk to me. Open up. Tell me what you're feeling. But for the avoidant, this feels like danger, like invasion, like the same childhood trap. They spend a lifetime escaping. So the very thing most women offer, constant closeness, constant attention, constant pursuit, becomes the very thing that drives the avoidant deeper into hiding. And yet, behind that wall, their craving only grows. Here's the truth no one tells you. Avoidants don't push you away because they don't care. They push you away because they care too much to risk being devoured. Their nervous system screams, protect, control, run, but their heart whispers, stay, feel, connect. It's a war inside them, and most of the time, fear wins, unless someone can give them what they crave most. A love without pressure, a space without judgment, a presence that says, I see you, you're safe here, even if you're silent, even if you're distant, even if you're not ready yet. That is the one thing they hunger for, the one thing so few ever give. But why? Why is it so rare? Why do women, often with the best intentions, find it almost impossible to give an avoidant what they need most? That's where the real story begins. Why they rarely get it. If avoidants crave safety, why don't they get it? Why do so many of their relationships end in silence, distance, and heartbreak? It's not because women don't care. It's not because women don't try. In fact, most women give more than enough. Attention, effort, affection, patience. But here's the twist. They give what they would need, not what the avoidant needs. Most women are raised to believe that closeness is proof of love. Text me back. Share your feelings. Tell me everything. This is how women often measure connection. And it's not wrong. It's beautiful. But for the avoidant, this constant reaching, this constant asking, this constant pressure feels like the very thing they've spent their whole life escaping. It doesn't register as love. It registers as threat. Imagine being thirsty, but every time you reach for water, someone pours the whole bucket over your head. You drown instead of drinking. That's what love feels like to the avoidant when it comes without space. So women give more. They reassure more. They chase more. Because the avoidant looks distant, cold, unmoved. And women think, if I just love harder, they'll finally feel safe. But here's the paradox. The harder you try, the more unsafe they feel. Because love, to them, is not about effort. It's about space. And most people cannot imagine that distance can also be love. Here's another reason avoidants rarely get what they crave. They don't ask for it. They don't admit it. They don't even know how to name it. Think about it. How many avoidants have you heard say, I need emotional safety. I need space without punishment. I need to be loved without being smothered. Almost none. Because their entire identity was built on pretending they don't need. So they crave something they cannot request. They hope for something they cannot articulate. And that silence becomes their prison. Then there's the mirror problem. Avoidants often attract partners who are anxious leaning. The anxious partner needs reassurance, constant closeness, constant proof. So what happens? The anxious one gives more, chases harder, pulls closer. Exactly the opposite of what the avoidant needs. And the avoidant? They retreat. They wall up. They starve quietly. It's a cycle of miscommunication, where both are starving, but in opposite ways. Now let's talk about culture. Our culture celebrates grand romantic gestures, big confessions, constant connection, always being available. Rom-coms don't show someone loving you by respecting your silence. They show someone chasing you down in the rain. But that's the exact opposite of what the avoidant finds safe. No one teaches us that stepping back can sometimes be love. That stillness can sometimes be intimacy. So even well-meaning women keep giving more closeness, more questions, more reassurance. And the avoidant keeps craving what no one thinks to offer, the space to breathe inside love. Another reason it's so rare? Fear. Because giving an avoidant what they crave requires confidence. It means saying, I don't need to chase you to prove my worth. I can hold my own ground. I can let you have space and still know I am enough. But many women fear that space means rejection. They fear that distance means disinterest. They fear that pulling back will make the avoidant disappear forever. So they close the gap. They lean in harder. They try to hold on tighter. And the avoidant runs faster. It's tragic, isn't it? The one thing avoidants crave most, emotional safety without pressure, is the one thing their partners rarely give. Not because they can't, but because fear gets in the way. Fear of being abandoned. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of not being enough. And ironically, that fear looks exactly like the thing that terrifies the avoidant most: neediness. So the avoidant's craving goes unseen. They don't name it. Their partner can't imagine it. And culture doesn't teach it. It becomes a hidden hunger, a longing buried under layers of denial, silence, and misinterpretation. But here's the secret. Even though avoidants rarely say it, they signal it. They leak out hints. They drop clues. They show you in subtle ways what they're really aching for. If you know how to watch, if you know how to listen, you can see it. And that's where the power shifts. Because once you learn their signals, you stop chasing shadows. You stop misreading the silence. You stop taking their withdrawal personally. And instead, you learn to give them the one thing they've craved their whole life. And when that happens, everything changes. The wall softens, the coldness warms, the distance shortens. Because for the first time, they're not just being loved, they're being loved safely. And that changes everything. How they secretly signal this need. Avoidants don't ask directly. They rarely say, "I need space without punishment. I need love without pressure." That language doesn't exist in their world. So instead, they signal it, not with words, but with patterns, with pauses, with the ways they move in and out. And if you can read these signals, you begin to see the truth hiding under the coldness. The first signal is silence. Most people misread silence as rejection. They think the avoidant has stopped caring, that they're losing interest, that they've given up. But silence often means something else. I need space to regulate. I need space to feel safe again. Please don't punish me for it. When the avoidant goes quiet, they're not always running away from you. They're running toward control. They're running toward the only safety they know. The second signal is withdrawal after intimacy. Have you ever noticed how, after a vulnerable moment, after a night of closeness, or after sharing something deep, the avoidant suddenly pulls back? It feels confusing, like whiplash, like they opened the door, only to slam it shut again. But this is a signal. It says, closeness feels good, but it also feels dangerous. I need to step back to prove to myself that I can survive it. It isn't rejection, it's recalibration. And beneath it, the craving remains. Please let me return without punishment. Please let my space be safe. The third signal is deflection. Avoidants often deflect compliments. They shrug off affection. They joke when things get too tender. And most partners see this as coldness, but it's actually a signal. It says, I want your love, but I don't know how to hold it yet. I need you to give it lightly, without forcing me to grip it. Another signal? Testing. Avoidants test in subtle ways. They might cancel plans last minute. They might disappear for a day. They might withhold a reply, not because they want to hurt you, but because they are watching. Watching if you explode. Watching if you chase. Watching if you punish. What they're really asking is this. Is my absence safe here? Can I exist without being controlled? Do you still hold me, even when I step back? The test isn't about the plan. It's about their core craving. They also signal through micro openings. Moments where they say something vulnerable, almost accidentally, like, I don't really talk about this stuff. Or, sometimes I feel like I mess everything up. To most people, these seem small, throwaway lines. But for an avoidant, these are breadcrumbs, tiny leaks of truth. And how you respond to these breadcrumbs determines whether they'll ever risk giving you more. Then there's body language. The avoidant might lean in slightly, then catch themselves and pull back. They might linger longer in your presence than they meant to. They might keep their words short, but their eyes hold just a beat too long. These are signals. Their body betrays what their mouth can't say. I want this. I just don't know if it's safe. Perhaps the biggest signal of all is contradiction. The avoidant says they don't want closeness, but they keep circling back to you. They say they don't need anyone, but they stay connected. They say they're fine alone, but they crave your presence. This contradiction isn't manipulation. It's the nervous system in conflict. One part screams, run. Another whispers, stay. And the way they move back and forth is itself the signal. A desperate, unspoken plea. Can you love me in the space between? Now, why does this matter? Because when you can read these signals, you stop taking their behavior personally. You stop thinking you're too much. You stop assuming they don't care. And instead, you begin to see the craving underneath. The unspoken hunger for safe love. Here's an example. Imagine you text the avoidant, pouring out your feelings. They don't reply for hours. You feel abandoned. You think, they don't care. I'm not a priority. But what if their silence wasn't indifference? What if it was their signal? A wordless way of saying, I need to step back so I can come back regulated. Please don't make my space unsafe. When you can hold that perspective, you shift. You no longer spiral into panic. You no longer chase. You no longer feed the cycle. And that is when the avoidant begins to feel the safety they crave. Another example. The avoidant pulls back after intimacy. You think, they regret it. They don't actually want me. But what if their retreat was the signal? Not regret, not rejection, but recalibration. Their nervous system saying, I need to breathe. Please don't punish me. Please let me return without shame. When you allow that, they slowly learn that closeness isn't dangerous. They begin to trust it, to crave more of it, to lean in without needing to run. This is the hidden language of the avoidant. Silence, withdrawal, deflection, testing, contradiction, micro-openings. Each is a signal. Each is a breadcrumb. Each is the avoidant's secret way of asking, can you love me without chasing me? Can you hold me without caging me? Can you let me breathe inside your love? And if you learn to see it, you stop fighting the wrong battle. You stop trying to break down their walls. And instead, you learn to make the space around those walls safe enough for them to open on their own. And that changes everything. The cost when it's missing. When an avoidant's deepest craving is never met. The cost is enormous, not just for them, but for the relationship and for the partner who loves them. The craving is simple. Love me without pressure. Let me breathe without punishment. But when that isn't given, the avoidant's nervous system collapses into defense. They armor up. They retreat deeper into their shell. And every attempt to reach them becomes another wound. Here's the first cost. A cycle of endless distance. When an avoidant doesn't feel safe to need space, they take it anyway, but in destructive ways. They withdraw without warning. They ghost emotionally. They stop communicating. And their partner, desperate for closeness, chases harder, texts more, pushes more, demands more. The avoidant feels trapped. The partner feels abandoned. Both end up locked in a loop where nobody feels secure. The second cost is resentment. When the avoidant isn't allowed their craving, they start to resent the relationship itself. Every text feels like an intrusion. Every request feels like a demand. Every question feels like surveillance. And that resentment builds silently until one day it erupts. In anger, in withdrawal, or in total disappearance. The partner is left stunned. How could they just leave? How could they switch off so easily? But the truth is, they were building walls for months because their craving was never seen. The third cost is the hardening of the mask. Avoidants already hide behind attachment. But when they're never given safe love, the mask grows thicker, colder, sharper. They tell themselves stories like, I'm better off alone. Needing someone is weakness. Love is just control in disguise. And the tragedy? They start to believe it. They begin living not as their tender self, but as the mask itself. A life built on defense, not connection. The fourth cost is emotional starvation. Avoidance may look self-sufficient, but inside, they are starving. Starving for warmth, for acceptance, for love without conditions. When their craving isn't met, that hunger grows unbearable. But instead of admitting it, they numb it with work, with distractions, with fleeting flings, with addictions that dull the ache. And each numbing choice drains them further from what they truly want. The fifth cost is the partner's exhaustion. When you love an avoidant who never feels safe enough to receive your love, you begin to feel invisible, unwanted, unworthy. You give, and they retreat. You try, and they deflect. You reach, and they disappear. At first you think it's you, that you're not enough, that you're failing. But eventually, you burn out. You stop giving. Or worse, you start begging. And both paths drain your soul. The sixth cost is missed intimacy. Real intimacy isn't just physical closeness. It's the safety to be fully seen, to be vulnerable, to be known. But when the avoidance craving is denied, they never risk it. They never let down their walls long enough to step into true intimacy. So the relationship stays shallow, surface level. Moments of closeness are followed by retreats. Every touch of tenderness is sabotaged by fear, and years can pass like this. A relationship that looks alive on the outside, but is hollow on the inside. The seventh cost is loneliness. For both, the avoidant, in their silence, feels alone. The partner, in their unmet needs, feels alone. Two people sharing space, yet both starved of connection. A quiet ache that grows heavier with time. And the cruel part? It was preventable. All it required was understanding the craving. The eighth cost is self-betrayal. When the avoidant cannot have their craving met, they betray themselves. They tell their heart to shut up. They tell their needs to stay buried. They tell their body to freeze when it longs to reach. This constant betrayal creates depression, anxiety, and a deep sense of emptiness. They live half alive because the full alive self requires risk, and risk has never been safe. The ninth cost is collapse. Some avoidants reach a point where the craving is so unmet, so suffocated, that they collapse. They give up on relationships. They declare love a scam. They disappear into isolation, not because they never wanted love, but because they never found a love that could hold them without caging them. But perhaps the most heartbreaking cost is the death of potential. Every avoidant carries a tender self inside, a version of them that longs for intimacy, that craves partnership, that dreams of being fully seen. When their craving isn't met, that version never gets to bloom. It stays hidden, dormant, buried beneath armor, and the partner never gets to meet the fullness of who they are. It is like loving a flower that never opens. No matter how much water you give, the bloom stays shut. This is why the craving matters, because without it, love dies slowly, not in flames, but in quiet suffocation. The avoidant hardens, the partner burns out, the intimacy fades, the loneliness grows, and what could have been extraordinary becomes another sad story of almost. But here's the truth most don't see. When the craving is met, everything changes. The mask begins to soften. The distance begins to close. The hunger begins to ease. The avoidant learns. Love doesn't have to mean losing myself. Space doesn't have to mean losing you. I can be free and held at the same time. And that is when the real relationship begins. What happens when they finally receive it? Something shifts. Not instantly, not like a switch being flipped, but slowly, softly, almost invisibly at first. The avoidant begins to exhale. For the first time in years, their body doesn't brace. Their chest loosens. Their guard lowers. Because they feel it. The thing they have been craving. Emotional safety. When the avoidant is given this safety, their entire world begins to change. The walls that once felt necessary start to feel unnecessary. The mask that once protected starts to feel heavy, and they begin tentatively, carefully, to take it off. At first, it's small. They answer a question. Instead of deflecting, they stay present. Instead of pulling away, they allow a moment of silence, without turning it into escape. These are tiny shifts, but for an avoidant, they are monumental. Over time, the craving being met does something deeper. It rewires the nervous system. It teaches their body that intimacy doesn't have to mean danger. That closeness doesn't always mean control. Every safe interaction, every moment of love without pressure becomes a new memory, a new blueprint, a new way of being. And slowly, they stop fighting themselves. The avoidant who once shut down begins to open up, not because they were forced, but because they were free. They begin sharing thoughts they never shared before. They begin expressing needs they once buried. They begin allowing emotions they once numbed. This is the quiet miracle of safety. It doesn't demand change. It creates space for change. And in that space, the avoidant's true self emerges. Partners often notice it in their eyes. The gaze that was once guarded becomes softer. The expression that was once distant becomes warmer. There's more laughter, more ease, more presence. The avoidant begins to enjoy connection instead of fearing it, because the craving, the thing they thought they'd never receive, is finally being fed. And here's the irony. When the avoidant feels safe, they stop needing so much distance. The partner doesn't have to chase, doesn't have to beg, doesn't have to prove, because the avoidant no longer feels the need to hide. Space becomes a choice, not a weapon. Closeness becomes a gift, not a threat. And the relationship shifts from a battlefield to a sanctuary. But there's another transformation. The avoidant begins to give back. You see, avoidants are not cold by nature. They are generous souls who had to freeze to survive. When their craving is met, their generosity wakes up. They start offering affection, initiating closeness, showing care in ways their partner never imagined possible. Because finally, it feels safe to give without losing themselves. This doesn't just heal the relationship. It heals the avoidant themselves. The shame of being too much dissolves. The fear of being controlled fades. The loneliness that haunted them for years begins to soften. They learn, I can be me and still be loved. I can be close and still be free. That realization is life-changing. And for the partner, the transformation is equally powerful. They no longer feel like they're chasing a ghost. They no longer carry the exhaustion of pulling double weight in the relationship. Instead, they feel chosen, wanted, received. The love they always hoped for finally becomes mutual, reciprocal, balanced, and the relationship grows deeper, more intimate, more alive. But let's be clear, this doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen with every avoidant. Some are too buried, some are too defended, some are too afraid. But for those willing, those who secretly ache for connection, the shift is possible. It begins with safety. It grows with patience. It blossoms with consistency. And the reward? A love that is both free and close, independent and bonded, safe and alive. So here's the question. Can you give the avoidant this craving? Can you hold space without pressure? Can you offer love without control? Can you let them be, without punishing their silence? If you can, you may be the first person in their life to show them that love doesn't have to hurt, that intimacy can be freedom, not a prison, that closeness can be chosen, not forced. And when you do, you'll witness something rare, an avoidant not running, not hiding, but staying, not because they have to, but because they want to. That is the miracle. That is the transformation. That is the power. of giving them the one thing they crave that so few ever give. And if this spoke to you, if you've loved an avoidant, or maybe you are one, remember this. Your story doesn't have to end in distance. It can end in connection. It can end in healing. It can end in love that feels like home. So take this with you. Share it if it resonated. Comment below with your experience, because your words might be the spark that gives someone else hope. And if you want more clarity, more insight, more tools for healing love, make sure you subscribe. This journey isn't just theirs, it's yours too. And together, we can rewrite the story